It comes as no surprise that in the wake of the 1970 breakup of the Beatles that George Harrison would release All Things Must Pass, a prolific, intensely spiritual, even majestic triple album. Having finally escaped the hectic, heady days of Beatlemania and the domineering shadow of Lennon and McCartney, Harrison was at last allowed to sing. Interestingly, Harrison's work is a mirror of his own spiritual journey, the subject of which becomes ourselves and, curiously, not George. The enigmatic Harrison allows us to identify with his questions and quest, but never his personal self. Emerging from what he refers to as his nightmare tenure with the Beatles, the tight-lipped guitarist has enjoyed a rather successful solo career. Even after several commercially disappointing albums in the late 70s, Harrison managed to flourish in his third decade of music with 1981's Somewhere in England and the massively successful Cloud 9 in 1988. In addition to which, George's work as a movie producer with his handmade films turned out such classics as Time Bandits and The Life of Brian. In 1988, Harrison returned to a brand new life as Nelson Wilbury in the now legendary Traveling Wilburys, a magnificent project he helped concoct with fellow conspirators Bob Dylan, Tom Petty, Roy Orbison, and Jeff Lynne. In 1977, George teamed up with his old friend and sitar mentor Ravi Shankar for Chants from India, a project that displays both Harrison's ongoing commitment to Vedic culture and philosophy. It is evident that Harrison's amazing musical and spiritual journey shows no signs of ceasing. While the forever-growing Beatles legacy propels John Lennon and Paul McCartney to mythical, almost godlike status, George Harrison remains a deeply human soul searcher whose fanciful music continues to touch and inspire.
Well, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because, I mean, I've seen them do things to people like, for an example, yeah, they tried to, kill Bob a few times. Also, the whole thing that split the Cream, actually, the band The Cream, was, something that they said in Rolling Stone, just, sort of depressed Eric, I know, to such a point where he just thought, just get out of this. Because you either have to agree completely with them and commit suicide, or, take them with a pinch of hate. So, really just, because I could read criticisms of myself and, if I'm in a decent mood, I'll think, well, that's unfair, and that is, maybe that's fair, but if you get depressed, you start agreeing with them. If you start agreeing with them, then you just go and do yourself in. But wouldn't do that, just for something else, because enough things happen to prove that it's not exactly how they see it, I mean, one situation with the rock press, for example, was the one guy who came to write an article because he disagreed with another article that had been written in his paper. And so he said, I've seen, 7 of these concerts and I disagree and I want to write it from my point of view. Then his article came out and it was not really good at all. And I thought, well, he's just, he was just cheating me, just to get in to talk to me. But then he just wrote a letter to me and sent what he wrote. And to compare that to what they printed, he just said, they just cut it out. They just cut out any favorable references to the music or to the response from the audience. It just made me feel, forget it, it's just, they're just trying to nail me now. And that's it. That's all it is. In fact, I think that's one reason I went on that tour with all those people, to do something which was, not done every week. The whole idea of having such a whole different bunch of people, different attitudes and different types of music, and just a broader type of show was because, it's boring just going on and on and on, pretending that we're all happy. But people think, you know, we go down Madison Square, wherever we go down, and who's on this week? This week it's him, next week it's somebody else, and there's a million different record companies and artists and bands. And, you know, a lot of the time the music's fine, a lot of the time, you know, how many of the people, the audience, who's like your audience now, or the audience of Madison Square Garden, who are the same people, and you come back and how many times did you really enjoy that show, or you were just there because you were with a chick who wanted to see it, or you were a chick who was with a guy who wanted to see it, or you just went because it was something to do, you know, or, I don't know, but it gets pretty tedious, you know. I don't like to just become part of something which is like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, something which just is repetitious, and, you know, and suddenly we find we're all old and we're all dying, and what did we do? We just got caught in a rut. Definitely. And that's the thing. Maybe the thing that disappointed me was there might have been a million people who showed signs of being that, and now in the 70s, out of the million, there may only be 100 left. The thing that's sad is what happened to the other, you know, 990,000. In music, well then it breaks down into, I mean, there's people who have a sort of more of a worldly consciousness, and that's why I've always been with Ravi Shankar, because he's bringing, particularly in the West, he's bringing something obscure and creating an audience, and through his audience then he's giving them something extra, you know, which, you know, that's something which the people who appreciate that can get into. You know, it's a whole other train of thought that comes from the music. You know, in simpler terms, there's people are like people who just convey in their music some sort of sincerity. Like I'm a big fan of Smokey Robinson, just because musically he's so sweet. You know, he's so sweet, he makes you feel nice, he makes me feel good, whereas there's a lot of music I listen to, which is popular music, which just makes me uptight, you know, even if I'm not really listening too close to it, it's just the sound of it and the whole thing, and the repetition, you know, the boring sort of repetition of how it's played. I always have been a fan of Dylan's, and I think I always will be, because, I don't know, somehow Dylan has always managed to upstage everybody. You know, when it comes down to being aware of, and also of being able to put into words. You know, I mean, like, we can feel and see a lot of things, but when it comes down to writing a tune and being able to communicate it through words, I mean, he's very good at being able to put words down. I find now, like, the 70s seems to, there's a lot of people who are just forced into being so much more individual, and that's where I'd put me. And people like, you know, Eric Clapton, if you hear his new album, I think it's so sweet. And he's one of the people who can play every guitar lick that all them people who are still playing what he was playing when he was in the Cream, they're still doing it now. You know what I mean? But he, in a way, is more out on a limb too with his music. But for my money, it's better than he's ever been. It's sweeter, warmer, but it's more personal to him now. And maybe that's why I like it better, because it's, you know, it's just richer, because he's showing more of, you know, how he feels. But there's a lot of us from the 60s who were, you know, came up in the 60s, and then I put John Lennon there as well, you know, like Walls and Bridges, that album in particular, where we were the people who sort of came up through, we battled our way up through the 60s and became something. And then in the 70s, there's a whole, multitude of other people who were just battling their way through and being really successful and all that. But that situation has forced all of us into more going inside ourselves more. It's like, say, with this new album of mine, all I want is to be able to sing the tunes I have and to do them as warm and as simple as possible. That's really, and I think by that, in itself, it puts you into that position of, I don't see my music anymore as being top 20 somehow. I just played you one track. No, it matters more to me that I can simply sing it better, play it better, and with less orchestration get over more feeling. Because it again gets down to say that out of the million people, if there's only 100 left out of the million who were supposedly potential love generation, if there's only 100 left, it's again, if there's 100 people, if the 10 people out of the 100 prefer it as it is now, then it makes me valid. Otherwise, it's down to suicide. Well, not really. Not really. It's like I don't always do it. I write tunes. Like I never wrote a tune actually for about 6 months up until last Saturday. I sat down, decided I better get some tunes together, and I just got into the mood of it and wrote or finished 9 tunes and wrote a couple of new tunes. So I don't always do it, but it is nice because, like you were saying earlier, music somehow is a way, I can talk to you for hours, but if I just sang you one tune, it'll somehow get to you easier, quicker. So, that's, in some respects, it's better to be able to communicate without so many words. You can say just a few simple words and put it in such a way that it gets over such a better point than talking for days. Yeah, good, thank you, God bless anybody who's, give us a smile, and anytime I'd rather have a smile than a knife in the back.
Yeah, I did. I suppose back in the 60s I thought, I gave myself till about 36, so I've still got a couple of years. But I think I'm probably around 37 or 38 at the moment that I feel then, I suppose, I could stop. But I don't know, it's hard to, it's like George Burns once said, that the only thing to retire for, the only reason is to do something better, and if you enjoy doing what you're doing, well, recently I've been more of a lawyer. I've been to court. If I hadn't have been a guitar player, I don't know what I would have done. I was definitely not a welder. I was an electrician for about 6 months. After I left school, I worked in Blackler's in Liverpool as an apprentice electrician. No, I mean, that was just a job, in my mind, just to fill in time between school and, doing this professionally. Not really. I mean, don't forget, everybody grows with us, I mean, the people who followed the Beatles in the 60s, they're not still teenagers either. They're all in the, late 20s, early 30s. So it's the same with Sinatra, Sinatra's got 40-year-old fans, 50-year-old fans, and we all grow up together. Well, it's not really, actually. It was supposed to be, but when you look at it, I mean, we had very short hair and we were very mild compared to what's going on, and to even how we were later. Well, we paid most of it to the government, actually. We paid 93% of everything that was ever earned. So we don't have a great deal of money. But then if I was to retire, I think I'd retire into just a little shack someplace. By the time I do get out of it, I've had my fill of all the excitement, and I think I'd just be really quiet, like a hermit. Well, I mean, there's little in the business side left in the way, but there's a lot of other things. Just physically, we're all in different places now, and we don't spend time together anymore. You know, that's the problem. We'd have to get to know each other again, because we haven't sort of hung around together like we did in the past. So, I mean, everybody's into their own lives. It seems very difficult, the idea of getting together. But it's just a joke. I mean, it needs a joke when the last offer was for $50 million, and it's crazy, you know. It's trying to put the responsibility of making the world a wonderful place again onto the Beatles. You know, I think that's unfair. I know a lot of people like the Beatles, but it's like 8 years ago we split up, and it's like difficult, you know. It's like we all grew up and we left home. It's like trying to get the family back again, or trying to get us to go back to school again. I suppose the first feeling I really had that was strong, spiritual feeling, was after taking LSD. Somebody, John Lennon and I were having dinner with somebody who was a dentist, and he dropped LSD in our coffee, and we took it, and ever since then it's all changed. And I don't know, on that, you know, what happens is it sort of makes a lot of blood go up into the brain, and you start using more of the brain through the chemical. You use more brain than you normally have used, and somehow the senses get heightened for a moment. And I don't know, I just took one look at the trees and the grass and the sky, and I thought, yeah, that's it. Well, really that happened because of my friendship with Ravi Shankar. He, I think that was 1971, he told me that this situation was happening in Bangladesh, and that he was going to do a concert to try and raise some money, but the concerts that he does, he can't really make that amount of money, and he was saying, maybe you've got some ideas, maybe you could help give me some ideas how I could do a show to make maybe $25,000, something which is much more than he could normally make in one concert. And then he gave me a lot of information about the war, and I read a lot about it, and once I got to understand what was happening, because what happened, there was more people killed, murdered in Bangladesh than in the Second World War, and not many people knew about it. So the more I read about it, the more I became involved with it. So I said, okay, I'll come on the show as well. And then I started to organize it, because I thought, if we're going to do it, let's do it big, and let's not make 25,000, let's make $5 million. Yeah, I liked it. I mean, for me, it's like the songs, you know, it's usually different songs mean different things to me. But I think generally the album's nice because it's happy. Like, we go through so many crazy things in our lives, and I've been up and down and up and down, and the music always reflects it, you know. Like some albums, I think my last album was more down, and this one is just happy and up. That's what I like about it. Well, I was fortunate. In that respect, the Beatles were fortunate that there was 4 people, because I think for somebody like Elton, you know, who's on his own, it's more difficult. You go crazy. With the 4 of us, we either went crazy together, you know, which made it easier, or we stopped ourselves going crazy because we had each other's company. But at the height of it all was the thing where I got involved with India anyway, and for me it was the meditation. Meditation was the key to releasing all the anxieties and frustrations. You know, when the nervous system gets wound up, then meditation is a way of helping to restore some sort of order. That it's like a mirror has become dirty, and so through meditation and yoga, it's the process of trying to polish the mirror so that we can reveal what we really are, which is Satchitananda, perfection, and that's it. Each one is potentially divine, and the goal is just to realize that. So, I mean, that's all I want to do. Nothing much. It just annoyed me that people got so into the Beatles, 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 Beatles. It's not that I don't like talking about them. I'd never stop talking about them. It's Beatles, there's Beatles, 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 Beatles. In the end, it's like, oh, sod off with the Beatles, you know. Screaming crowds everywhere you go, pressmen at your door for years on end, the front cover of every newspaper every day of the week. For years, prying, you know, everywhere you go, trying to find out any little bit of dirt that they can write about you. It's a lot to deal with, and that's the thing. The Beatles sort of did haunt a lot of us for years, and still do. I had no ambition when I was a kid, other than to play a guitar and get in a rock and roll band. And I don't really like to be the guy in the white suit at the front. Like in the Beatles, I was the one who kept quiet and at the back and let the other egos be at the front. You know, we were naive in those days. You see, a big change happened in 1966, particularly to John and myself, because a dentist we were having dinner with put this LSD in our coffee. Now, people who've taken that will know what I'm talking about, and anybody who hasn't taken it won't have a clue, because it transforms you. After that, I didn't need it ever again. That's the thing about LSD, you don't need it twice. Oh no, I took it lots of times. But I only needed it once. He was annoyed because I didn't say that he had written one line of this song, Taxman. Well, I didn't, because he was already dead after that. But the point to that was that I also didn't say how I wrote 2 lines to Come Together or 3 lines to Eleanor Rigby. You know, I wasn't getting into any of that. I think in the balance, I would have had more things to be niggled with him about than he would have with me. Well, I liked him very much. He was a groove. He was a good lad. But at the same time, he misread me. He didn't realize who I was. And this was one of the main faults of John and Paul. They were so busy being John and Paul, they failed to realize who else was around at the time. You know, I don't work like business people. It's the same with music. If I have to try and make a record that will fit into the top 10, then I'm wasting my time. I have to be me. And it's like that kind of thing with Bob. It would be silly not to try to do something with him. You know, from where I sit, I mean, I just think he's so good. It's like losing your parents or anybody you know and love. You know, all things must pass. But when it's taken in a violent way like that by somebody else, you know, it makes it very strange. He was very good. He was very good, and he was, in some ways, he was a slight genius. I mean, but apart from that, he was still just some guy like the rest of everybody else. He wasn't, but he was as well. Everybody likes to say, okay, one of your best friends got assassinated, so surely you must be nervous about being assassinated too. You know, I like to take care, but I don't walk around fearing for my life, and I don't think, you know, anybody could be bothered killing me. You know, what's the point of killing me? There's nothing, you know. I don't feel that important. It's strange, but it's just another one of the strange things that's happened in this life. You know, our manager died, our road manager was shot by the LA police. So many of our friends died through the years, and, you know, everybody went on drugs, everybody went to the Himalayas, everybody got divorced. You know, it's just a very concentrated kind of life. The whole thing has been like this, really, in one way or another. I think movies have always gone hand in hand with the music business, really. I'm sure you've heard the story about Monty Python got into pre-production of The Life of Brian, and then the backers backed out. And I suppose that's what backers do, don't they? And a friend of mine said, is there any way you can think of helping him get that movie made? And I said, well, I'd love to see it. And I spoke to my business manager, and he came up with the idea of us becoming Bialystock and Bloom, the producers. And it just went from there. The film did okay. We managed to get back the money that, you know, we'd put ourselves into the pawn shop to get the money to do it.
We managed to come out of that still alive. And then there were all the spin-offs, the Terry Gilliam Time Bandits movie and Michael Palin with The Missionary, and it just started going, kept going. I mean, right now we've got 3 movies that are just in post-production, and there's one out here at the moment with Neil and I. We just had Mona Lisa, and we don't talk about Shanghai Surprise. A lot of money for it, because that was an expensive one, and we weren't that keen on doing it, some of the people in Handmade, but it was purely because the producer said he got Madonna and Sean Penn. And then we thought, oh, all right, then we'll do it. And that was the worst decision. It's the only film we've ever been involved with a big budget and with people from Hollywood, and never again. It's just too much trouble. I mean, we can work with people who, you know, can enjoy themselves and who have a sense of humor. Although Sean, I really like Sean, I'll just get that in, because I know he's been given a lot of stick for the way he's acted, and he certainly didn't act that well for us. I don't mean as an actor, as a person, but although they go hand in hand. When you're not in a good mood as a person, your performance as an actor suffers too. But he actually, I thought, was a real funny fella. He is, when he's up, he's great. Yeah, well, one of the reasons that I did it, well, actually, the main reason I did it was because they asked Eric Clapton, he called me up and he said, will you do it? They want you to do it. Go on, do it. So, okay, because I don't want to get into this thing where I've been off the stage so long that I get frightened of the idea. So I thought, well, it's just like testing the water again. And it's in a sort of simple enough, because I don't have to go out there and be on for 2.5 hours. I mean, that's a different thing. There was certain sounds I didn't want. You know, I'm particularly tired of these sort of drum machine sounds that you hear on every record, and also there's these sort of MIDI'd DX7 sounds. You know, you get these keyboards all MIDI together and they all sound like bells and stuff like that. And every record seems to sound the same to me. It's just like some clatter going on. So I thought, well, what I would like to do is more like how we used to do them in the old days. Get Ringo, and we'll have real drummers, and we'll have real pianos, and real guitars, and actually real people, rather than, you know, just sort of 2 people making this computerized kind of music. So that was the basic thought, to make it sound more just like a band playing. So, so Jeff Lynne was, when he came in the picture, and it just seemed good timing. I was in a good mood, and last year I decided, okay, next year I'm going to make the album. Set a date for January. Got booked Ringo and this other friend of mine, Jim Keltner, drummer, and got a couple of friends around and just started. Well, I don't think of it like that. I did at first, you know, after, like the first few years after we split up, when I did those first solo albums, I realized I'm more so doing live shows because, you know, like the Bangladesh concert, for instance, it's like everybody still had that mania going, and I think Paul has mentioned it himself, you know, you can't live up to the Beatles. The Beatles was such a big phenomena that you can't match that really. But I think you can musically. Can match it. I mean, because when I listen to some of the Beatles stuff, it's nostalgic and I enjoy it, and a lot of the stuff I thought was really good. But there's a lot of rubbish in there too. And, you know, I don't think they were that good. They were very good, and there was something else going for them. You know, we were innovative and had good ideas, but still being a part of that, you know, we didn't get that carried away. You know, we could still see our own limitations. But all those years that have elapsed since then, you know, I don't really think of it like that. I just feel that I'm just some guy just like everybody else. And maybe it's detrimental having been the Beatles.
Yeah, Elton plays on 3 tracks. Gary Wright plays on 2 tracks. And Jeff plays keyboard on the remaining tracks. Elton's fun. He's great. He's a really funny fella, and he just He'd said a long time ago, see, a friend of mine who plays drums on one track and a percussion player called Ray Cooper. Now, Ray's been in Elton John's band for years, and he was just on the Down Under tour, you know, in Australia. And at the time, I decided I was going to do this album. So Elton was phoning up and sending messages through Ray saying, if you want to, you know, if you want me to come and do something on the album. So when he got back to England, I called him up, said, okay, you're on. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. And he just nipped in and played. He's a great rock and roll piano player. He's good. We share the same wife. I've been friends with Eric for years, and I think I always will be. He's a lovely fella, and I love him very dearly. And I just call him up again, you know. Doing an album, Eric, will you come and play? Sure, he came over, played great stuff, Devil's Radio, Cloud 9. He does a nice little solo on the end of That's What It Takes, and also the other one, the second side, called The Wreck of the Hesperus. Sure, yeah, I'm not a wreck yet. You couldn't make an ex-Beatle record without having Ringo, could you? Yeah, it's like a built-in thing. If I play a song to Ringo, I don't need to say to him, you know, I want it to go like this. I just play it and he joins in. You know, maybe you can tell him I want to stop there, you know, whatever. Or can you do a little fill there? But other than that, he's got a great feel. Ringo, he's like, I sort of don't practice much on the guitar. I just pick it up and play it when I need to, and he's the same. He never practices. He's a very naughty boy. But he just gets his sticks and he just does it, and it sounds just like Ringo, and you can hold the rock steady all day long. It was just the time off was long enough. I was in the studio all last year doing the Shanghai Surprise soundtrack, and it just was feeling, you know, that I was in a good mood to do an album. And as I say, I've been thinking over the years now, when I do my next album, I'm going to have somebody to help me. Who is it going to be? So all that clicked into place, as I say, with meeting Jeff and getting to know him, and it just worked out, the timing just worked out that it was this year. I mean, I say that to people, you know, but I always knew I'd do another album. I'm not sure if I'll ever do another one now, though. And also, I've been in my studio home, I pop in quite often and write a song and just switch on the 24 track and make a demo. So I've always been writing songs, I've always been playing, and all the friends I have, there's hundreds of people who live near me, and we're all guitar players. You know, I mean, it's like, it's ridiculous. You know, I've got, like you say, Deep Purple, I've got 2 of those guys there. I've got one guy from Bad Company. There's Dave Gilmour from Pink Floyd. Alvin Lee from the old 10 Years After. Gary Moore. And then there's Joe Brown, who I don't think they know in America, but he was a very famous Cockney guitarist from the early 60s. And he sort of did work in the old days with Eddie Cochran and Gene Vincent and all those sort of people. And even Murray Hopkins still lives down the road. So, you know, there's a lot of people. If you know, there's always 10 rhythm guitars going on in my house. Just like being a gardener on occasion, you know, so I'm a gardener too, but I'm not really a gardener either, you know. I play a bit of guitar, write a few tunes, make a few movies, but none of that's really me. The real me is something else. Now, you have to figure that out. The real me is the same as the real you. All different kinds. There's no simple way around it. We started out with comedies with Python and Python spin-offs like Time Bandits and Michael Palin, a couple of films with him. And we've done some rather serious ones. And I personally like comedies. I don't like, you know, all this violence and stuff, although we have had a bit of violence in a couple like Mona Lisa, but I mean, if it sort of was part of the story and it wasn't done just for the, you know, for the Rambo effect. But there's all different kinds of films. Most of the ones we've done tend to be films that other people, other companies have either turned down or you get to get quite good on your instrument. But then we got famous and it spoiled all that because we just go round the world singing like the same 10 dopey tunes. And, you know, and then you'd have a few weeks off and you didn't want to know about the guitar. Then I went through the sitar period, and then I did that one tour in '74, which, apart from almost, you know, killing myself with fatigue, I quite enjoyed. I didn't have a voice at the time, though. Yeah, I don't mind if somebody approaches me, like they have done, and say, I want to use, can we use your song to advertise Chrysler? Or we want 18 seconds of something in the way she moves. Say, okay, if they want to pay me, but you can't have me singing it. You can re-record your own version, and that's my choice to let that happen. But if I turn on the TV and I hear that happening, and especially when somebody's paying my record company, my ex-record company, it's a bit of a joke, the idea of a comeback, you know, especially to me, you know. I don't know, because I don't really see myself as a fully fledged showbiz star anyway, you know, like that. That side of it's always been a bit of a joke to me. Although I know people who are still desperate to be as famous today as they were last month or a year ago or something. I think it's sort of a bit sad. I remember once, about 10 years ago, Ringo said to me, I've got to have a #1 record. And I said, no, you don't. I said, you're #1. You're the #1. First of all, when we were being offered lots of money to reform, none of us were in the mood for it. And then so much time elapsed, I think we all even forgot about the Beatles. And then this thing happened with John, which makes it impossible anyway. Well, not really. If you go around thinking that, then, you know, you just worry yourself to death. But, you know, there's a lot of loonies everywhere. It's just, I think at the bottom line to that one is that I'm not important, not that important. Sometimes you can do stuff which isn't actually bad, but it's not popular, so therefore they say it didn't get in the top 20, so therefore it was bad. But actually, I know I've written tunes which have been better than some of the hits I've had, but because they weren't hits, they write about them as if they were terrible disasters. Or we got the wrong cast, the wrong director, the wrong producer. You know, where did we go right? But that's the difficult thing. This is why I really prefer music, because in music, you've got absolute control over what you do. You know, all the guys are in there, and I said, well, what do you think? And he says, oh, you were okay, Dad, you know. You should have done rock and roll music and Johnny Be Good and Sweet Little 16. I said, well, that's Chuck Berry, really. I know how he feels, because in a way, I wish I'd have written those tunes instead of the ones I'd written. I don't know if I'm back. I've been back, but I don't know if I'm back this week, but I am a happy man. Yeah, well, I didn't really think about it. It just felt time to make a record, and so I made it, and you know, sometimes things go right, and sometimes they don't. This time it went right. I met a few people. Just at Christmas, I saw some kids in about 18-year-old in Los Angeles, and they saw me walk in a shop, and they looked at each other and said, oh, there's that singer, which I thought was pretty good. Well, it's the silly newspapers. I mean, they're not all silly, of course, but some of them are very silly. And because I don't go discothequing and things like that where people hang out with their cameras, so they presumed that I was Howard Hughes with my big fingernails and Kleenex tissues and that kind of stuff. Bottles of urine all around the house, and but I wasn't like that at all. I go out all the time, or a lot of the time, see friends, have dinner, go to parties.
Sounds all right.
I'm even more normal than, you know, normal people. You know, my garden, you can stroll around it in 10 minutes if you're power walking, which is what I sort of do these days.
So what have you got?
If you saunter, it could take half an hour. If you swagger, maybe 45 minutes. Lakes, well, there's a bit of water, yeah. There's a sort of flows around that was built in the Victorian days. It's very nice. It was all covered in soil and broken lavatories from a building site when I bought it. He's become aware now of the last few years, and I didn't really tell him anything about the Beatles because it was so long ago anyway. I didn't want to burden him with all that. But nevertheless, I think most kids, when they get to about 4 or 5, they see Yellow Submarine. And then he sort of twigged, and then he came up to me one day and he said, "Hey, Dad, how do you play the piano lick from Hey Bulldog?" Which I thought, well, that's strange. How does he know a song like that? But it's in Yellow Submarine. Yeah, he came to the, I did this show, The Prince's Trust, last July. He came to that show, and I suppose you could call it performing, but after the show I said to him, "Well, what did you think?" And he said, "Yeah, you were okay, Dad. Why didn't you do rock and roll music and Sweet Little 16? Johnny Be Good?" I said, "Well, actually, that's Chuck Berry." Last time, well, I did one show which I happened to, I wore this suit for it. It's the first time I've worn it since the Carl Perkins show, which was a televised program for HBO. Before that, I did a tour in America in 1974, but in England I never performed since the Beatles, which was 1965 or something like that, 66 maybe. I was, yeah. It felt like I was going the electric chair. Sat there for hours waiting to go on, and very, very nervous. Fortunately, yeah, there's a lot of support from the gang, Ringo, and well, Phil Collins was playing one night, and Eric Clapton, of course, and Elton, and Midge-Ure, a lot of people. I think that's sort of an idea that's bubbling about, maybe in Elton's mind, I don't know. It's sort of a good idea because everybody enjoys playing together. The mania side of it happened, it started happening in, I think, 1963, when we started touring seriously in England, like on the big Moss Empire circuit. And then we did some tours around Europe, and I think it was because of the mania that was happening then that the Americans caught on and came over, and they did features on us in Time and Life and Newsweek. So then that sort of set us up for the trip to the USA in 1964. Well, it sort of wears off and it comes back again. Like just recently I feel quite excited to be alive, regardless of whether I'm making a record or promoting my record. Buy my album now, right? You know, quite apart from that. But I think for me, the mania got to me in 1966, and around that time I got a bit tired of what they call the adulation. I'm still not that keen on that side of it. It's nice to be popular, it's nice to be loved, but it's not so nice to be chased around and on the front page of the paper every day of your life with, you know, people climbing over the wall all day long. Yes, well, we did tend to meet most of the dignitaries of the world. Well, sometimes it was boring, sometimes we just make fun of them, or you have our own little in-jokes, you know, to get through. Oh, we were very cheeky, yeah. We had to be, really. It's like a, you know, survival kind of thing. Not really, no. I do like, most people, I like the rock and roll years when you see what happened when Cuba attacked Russia and all that, whatever happened, and you remember that Eddie Cochran was singing this tune. I like nostalgia in that respect, and I suppose all that 20 years ago today stuff that was happening last year, you know, it's nice to be reminded of things that happened, except it reminds you how old you are, which is not so good. Yeah, well, I've liked bikes, you know, since I was a kid. I think the first race I saw, this is going to give my age away, but it was 1954, when I was 11. I used to go and watch Jeff Duke and Ray Am and Armstrong, all those people back in the 50s. And I was a friend of Barry Sheen, well, I still am. And, you know, so during the 70s, I visited quite a few Grand Prix. In 1966, after Beatlemania and all the success that we'd had, I still felt like this isn't it. I need something else. And it occurred to me this age-old question about who am I, where have I come from, and where am I going? And so I pursued that, and it led me to India. There had been a lot of use of the word guru, and until it's been abused, actually. But guru means dispeller of darkness. And Dayama, she is an angel in herself. She may not like to hear me say that, but the essence, what people think, what is the essence of an angel? It's somebody who's angelic, somebody who has that divinity within themselves. Just the presence within a person like Dayamata is what I would call the angelic quality. I remember it well. Albert Hall, and Bob did a set at the beginning. Like, the show was in two halves, and the first half he came out and did his usual thing with the guitar and the harmonica. And then on the second half he came out with the band. Now, we knew this was going to happen anyway, but most of the audience in the Albert Hall were, you know, I mean, they were nouveau folk fans, right? You know, they just got into folk, and so they were kind of disturbed. You know, a lot of them were like really uptight because they were like, hey, he's forsaken the folk, you know, and all this. But Bob just came out and he said, well, you know, you all may know this song. Remember how it goes? Well, here's how it goes now, you know. And they just went off wailing. You know, it was good. It was a great show. I mean, it's ragged, but, you know, that is the nature of Bob. Raggedy. And it was very good, though, and all through that second half, people were getting up and walking out and, you know, shouting, and it was controversial. For me, it was just like, it just seemed, it was interesting. It was, you know, it seemed kind of natural, really, you know, because there's a limit to, you know, what you can do just with acoustics, or, you know, I mean, it didn't seem that Bob should particularly be limited to just doing that. You know, it seemed kind of a natural progression.
I remember back in the 80s asking people about Damon, you know, whether they'd put him in a team, Formula One, and not many people would, you know, at that time, I mean, they were all looking for the Sennas and stuff, and, you know, they forget that people can be, you know, some people are just out front like Senna, and there's other people who just need a bit of practice.
And in a way, that famous name became a bit of a burden for him.
It was a terrible thing, really, to have to live.
Hello, Emerson. So nice to know you well. And I look forward to seeing you. Sorry I'm not in Brazil, but next time we're going on holiday, we have lots of caipirinhos, and we'll have a nice good time. Okay, well, God bless you, and everybody in England who loves you, all your friends, and Olivia and Danny too, join me to say congratulations on a wonderful recovery and a great life, and more to come. We miss you.
You know, we've all leading our own lives. It's been 8 years, really. And I don't think an ad in the paper is going to do the trick. We have to want it personally ourselves, and not just to make $50 million or whatever the figure may be. We must do it because we want to be together as people first, and secondly, to be together for the music, and then everything else would fall into place. But at the moment, everybody is doing their own lives, and it feels to me a bit like saying, please go back to school. You know, that was like our apprenticeship. Yeah. It gave me new sort of energy, new hope. You know, just the whole idea of a new deal, a new situation, new people, more incentive, you know, more energy, input from other people, because the old record company, you know, they just took us for granted. I had stuff by various holy men and swamis and mystics, and I went around and looked for them. Ravi and his brother gave me a lot of books by some wise men. One of the books, which was by Swami Vivekananda, who said, if there's a God, you must see him, and if there's a soul, we must perceive it. Otherwise, it's better not to believe. It's better to be an outspoken atheist than a hypocrite. And after all my life, I've been brought up, well, they tried to bring me up as a Catholic. They had told you to just believe what they're telling you, and, you know, not to have the direct experience. And this, for me, going to India and hearing somebody saying, you know, no, you can't believe anything until you have direct perception of it. And I thought, wow, you know, fantastic, at last, you know, find somebody who makes some sense. And so I wanted to go deeper and deeper into that.
You have to change because it's a waste of time. Everybody is so limited and so really useless when you think about the limitations on yourself. And the whole thing is to change, try and make everything better and better. And that's what the physical world is about, is change. It means all sorts of things to me. It means, I mean, the first concept of a man in the sky, well, I kicked that one a few years ago, but I've got back to that now because it's a man in the sky as well, if you like. It's just everything. The whole thing, it's just everything. Every aspect of creation is part of God. Well, let's face it, these laws that you say, hidden laws, they are hidden, but they're only hidden by our own ignorance. And the word mysticism is just being arrived at through people's ignorance. There's nothing mystical about it, only that you're ignorant of what that entails.
I thought, it's really committing myself to something. There's going to be a lot of people are going to really hate me because people fear the unknown, you see. It's some sort of instinct in people. The point was that I was sticking my neck out on the chopping block, but at the same time I thought, well, nobody's saying it. Yeah. It would be, I wish somebody else was doing it so that, you know, to represent, you know, because everything should be represented in a way, and if everybody's just going bebop baby.
It's like losing your parents or anybody you know and love.
Ravi and his brother gave me a lot of books by some wise men. One of the books, which was by Swami Vivekananda, who said, if there's a God, you must see him, and if there's a soul, we must perceive it. Otherwise, it's better not to believe. It's better to be an outspoken atheist than a hypocrite. And after all my life, I've been brought up, well, they tried to bring me up as a Catholic. They had told you to just believe what they're telling you, and, you know, not to have the direct experience. And this, for me, going to India and hearing somebody saying, you know, no, you can't believe anything until you have direct perception of it. And I thought, wow, you know, fantastic, at last, you know, find somebody who makes some sense. And so I wanted to go deeper and deeper into that. So it is difficult when four people are telling the story, because it's actually four different stories. I mean, you must realize it's got to be somewhat of a compromise when four people are involved, but we're trying to just say how it felt to us. I mean, it is both a record, a video, a television program, a book, and no doubt somewhere down the line it will also be a t-shirt. Yeah, it was fun. It was good because enough time had gone between 1969 and now. You know, the kind of the Beatles had gone away and we'd all had enough time to breathe, and I think it's much easier to look at it now from a distance. The main gist of it is, with the music, to find the most ancient Beatle music possible and come in chronological order through the various other records we'd made and bring it up to date, up to now. And then it goes up, I think, into our Hamburg material that we recorded a couple of songs for Polydor. And then goes through some Decca audition. And we've tried to create a lot of the most famous songs, but totally different versions of them. You know, they're just going to probably be
reveling in it. Well, it's always the end of the beginning, isn't it? Play the game existence till the end of the beginning. Yeah, well, we certainly made some good records. Back to the very earliest thing we ever did, which was That'll Be the Day, made on a home recording of Paul's. Very rough. Oh, it just keeps on coming. There's a lot of very early years, but stuff that hasn't been heard. Television or radio shows from Sweden and various things from the Command Performance, things that just had a one showing on television, but we managed to find the soundtracks to some variety shows we did on television in those early days. And the first record comes right up to, I think it's somewhere around the time of Please Please Me. There's also a very first version of Love Me Do that George Martin found. I mean, it's got to sound like them if it is them, and I'm sure he would have really enjoyed that opportunity to be with us again.
Geoffrey Giuliano is the author of some 30 internationally best-selling books on the Beatles, John Lennon, and other iconic musicians of the 1960s. In 2006, his book, Paint It Black, The Murder of Brian Jones, was made into a film by Stephen Woolley and Nick Powell entitled Stoned, The Wild and Wicked World of Brian Jones. It remains a cult classic and the only film bio of the Rolling Stones. Giuliano is also a veteran journalist, having written for dozens of high-profile newspapers and magazines, including The Sunday People, The Daily Mail, The News of the World, The Mail on Sunday, Playgirl, and Rolling Stone. A noted film actor, Giuliano starred in such movies as Vikingdom, Scorpion King 3, Jules Verne's The Mysterious Island, The Fifth Execution, Far Cry 3, Fire Fire Desire, among many. In addition, he hosted the long-running North American syndicated radio series, Geoffrey Giuliano's Roots of Rock, for 5 years, as well as pioneering the audiobook industry in the 1990s by authoring, narrating, and producing over 250 original, non-book-based, interview-driven productions. Giuliano's publishers included Random House, HarperCollins, Delta Entertainment, Durkin Hayes, Playaway Audio, Speechworks, and B&B Audio, among dozens more internationally. In 1998, Random House acquired his firm Tribute Audio, for which Giuliano acted as CEO and publisher for 5 years. His best-selling audiobook, That Fateful Night, True Stories of Titanic Survivors in Their Own Words, was nominated for a Grammy. In 2014, Geoffrey Giuliano founded Icon Editions and G2 Media Arts to market his updated works as well as publish new projects. As a visual artist, Geoffrey has been showing in galleries across America since 1977, garnering impressive reviews. His first professional assignment was designing several T-shirts for The Who's Pete Townsend in 1976. Geoffrey also designed and illustrated many of his original rock biographies for the biggest publishers in the world from 1984 to 2006, as well as designing for his pioneering record label, Samba Records, in the mid-1990s. From 2006 to 2011, Geoffrey was also the primary designer for the French fashion house Cotai. When Giuliano first conceived of creating his own literary imprint, Icon Editions, he became responsible for illustrating and designing 35 book covers, several hundred CDs, DVDs, as well as dozens of promotional posters, and eventually an entire collection of exclusive fashion and art. The expansive Design by Giuliano brand grew out of Geoffrey's impressive commitment to the arts and is the culmination of a lifetime's work by an extraordinarily talented and determined Renaissance man.